state and federal dollars to continue incorporating these programs. And I think that's the wave of the future in terms of criminal justice, instead of warehousing people, helping them to become healthy, productive, participating members of our community. We also are still very actively engaged in disaster readiness. I'm sorry Carolyn's not here today because she was very actively involved with helping Terra Linda get going with the CERT teams and disaster readiness. And sometimes people lose some of their skills and new people move in, so we still have allocated some resource in the event that the Terra Linda community wants to re-engage with new CERT programs or have some needs for disaster readiness in the community. We have some resources available for communities to access funds to help them with that. I launched a medical reserve corps about 10 years ago that is going to be ready to go in the event of a disaster. 400 licensed healthcare professionals are volunteering and trained, and they have received national acknowledgement for their work. They go to disaster events, so they'll be ready to, expand capacity for healthcare for hospitals if hospitals come down in an earthquake. And it's been a very vibrant program. The other exciting news is that we're working with the Marin Farmers Market, the Sunday and Thursday market, to create a permanent venue. So you'll be you'll be having the opportunity to vote on that. So even though I know the San Rafael plan identified the Christmas tree lot for high-density housing, that's not going to happen there. We're working with the farmers market to create a place where the farmers can come, where there can be outlets, where there can be some sheltering, so you can even go in inclement weather, and even a small grocery, educational, local grown component in a building. So we think it'll be a vibrant, wonderful part of the community. We're looking at the road planning and the sidewalk and walkway planning to try to tie in the promenade work that was done by Terra Linda a number of years ago that would connect Scotty's Market all the way to the Civic Center. We're going to incorporate those plans as we look at the pathways and access ways along there so that we can do another segment of that. So it's very exciting. And I'm also working with San Rafael in a subcommittee. We're tackling a number of challenging issues, including homelessness in the downtown area, and some of the challenges on how we address helping people to get out of homelessness. I was able to, through the Housing Authority, access 35 Section 8 type vouchers. Those are the only vouchers that are actually protected now. Most of Section 8 has taken big hits because of sequestration. But the veterans vouchers are still protected. And with 35 vouchers, we've been able to take veterans who've been homeless on the streets and put them actually into safe housing with wraparound services. And at least 10 of them in the last year have found their way out of the Section 8 housing into market housing or have passed away. And so that leaves those 10 vouchers open for the next 10 people to come in. So it's a way to start trying to nip away at some of the challenges in how do we house people. So then the big deal that everybody's buzzing about right now, we heard a little bit earlier, is of course Plan Bay Area, housing element, and specific plans. And it's one of the challenges is that all three of these big issues are happening all at the same time. And so they're complex and confusing, but they're in some ways interrelated, in some ways unique. The Plan Bay Area was a state law that went into effect with Darrell Steinberg, SB 375, which required local councils of governments, there's 14 of them in the state of California, get together and plan for how your region is going to grow and reduce greenhouse gases and eliminate the sprawl effect and try to preserve your sensitive areas while developing housing and transit in urban center areas. And there was a lot of very heated conversation at ABAG. I presented a lot of testimony to the rest of my colleagues at that agency when I served on that organization regarding issues around water supply, infrastructure, school, fire, housing. You know, all of those issues that you can't just plop up housing and not think about the bigger picture. And in the beginning of those discussions, there didn't seem to be a lot of traction being gained on that. But as we've gone through this process, there are more cities and towns and counties in the region that are questioning, how do we do this? Now, the conversation is worth having. How do we grow as a region with a population that's expected to grow up to 2 million more people by 2040 and invest our limited public resources that we have into the needed infrastructure, housing, growth, economy, you know, the economic development, the protection of our sensitive areas. How do we do that? And in our general plan, we actually have addressed those issues in terms of not sprawling and protecting sensitive habitat and looking at infill locations for redevelopment opportunities. And the Plan Bay Area has said that they have looked at all of our general plans, and the allocations that they have given us are reflective of those. Now, in Marin, of the originally ABEG was given by the state 990,000 units that we were supposed to plan for, and as an agency, we all got together and said, wait a minute, this doesn't reflect our population growth, it doesn't reflect what's happening in the job market. You know, we have to narrow that down and get something that's a little bit more based in reality over the next 20 plus years. And as a result, the state lowered the regional amount to 650 units or so. Now, most of those, a third of those units are projected to go into Oakland, San Jose, and San Francisco. And Oakland, San Jose, and San Francisco are saying, fine, we'll take all of this. We will build 50-story high-rise apartments in our cities, but we want to have the money that goes along with that, because in San Francisco, they have a 200-year-old brick-lined sewer system that won't be able to hold all the poop that's going to be coming down into that sewer. And so the conversations about how do we direct our resources is an important one, because MTC has already said out of the gate that 85% of the money that's going to be directed around the Bay Area is just going to go into maintaining our freeways and bridges. And that only leaves an extra 15% for the other more local projects. And so there's a battle going on right now about that. The top 15 areas of the 9 Bay Area counties and 101 cities and towns are taking on 2/3 of the growth, and not one city or town in Marin or the county is in that list. For Marin County, we're taking about less than 1% of the growth for the total region over the next 20 years, because we have historically had very low growth, very low population. But our growth is happening, and we're growing internally our own. Our kids, we heard, you know, 2 teachers from the mayor that can't live here. And 60% of our workforce is driving into our community to work here. So, you know, it's good conversations to have about how do we grow wisely, maintaining community character, addressing the issues of the schools, the water, all of the other infrastructure issues within that context. So that's Plan Bay Area. Now superimpose on top of that what the county's going through right now in creating a housing element. Housing elements are plans that we are mandated by the state to submit every 4 years since 1981. It's a process that's been done for decades now. And what the requirement is that we have to look at all of the different opportunity areas that are land areas that are currently zoned for certain housing and commercial, and we have to send a report to the state to demonstrate how those meet our needs in our community and address our fair share. And the housing element doesn't just mean all affordable housing, it's also the market rate housing that comes too, the housing that's just sort of standard regular housing. to the affordable housing. And affordability in Marin County is based on what our median income is. And the recent report is our median income in Marin County is $129,000 a year. So that means low-income housing in Marin is $65,000 a year. So if you're building affordable units for a family of 4, you know, they can't make more than $65,000 a year. And people often get confused with the different kinds of housing that is in that affordable housing work, from public housing authority, HUD housing, which we have a number of in our community, to nonprofit housing, where they are developing units and have very strict criteria. For example, Bridge Housing has a number of units in Marin County, and they do criminal background checks and they do credit checks on every single potential resident that they would have as a potential resident in their buildings. And they also make sure that people are complying by the rules. They have an on-site property manager, and they're well maintained. They've offered, and so has EAH, to take people on tours of these nonprofit housing facilities so that you can see who's there and who lives there.
So would that be like Marin City?
No, Marin City is HUD housing. That's a different kind of housing. That's housing authority and HUD housing. And the direction that HUD is moving is to move out of actually public housing and do conversions to more nonprofit mixed-use housing without displacing tenants or residents. And the funding that comes from the feds now, especially after sequestration, is not meeting the needs of what the housing authority needs to be able to maintain their properties and to be able to actually support the tenants that are living there with their subsidized rents. The other is Section 8 housing, and we have a waiting list of over 5,000 people on Section 8. We have 2,000 people that have vouchers currently, but the feds, as a result of sequestration, has eliminated $2.7 million of our Marin County budget. So it could mean down the road, once this is implemented in our county, that people who already are housed in housing units with a Section 8 voucher, which means that they pay 1/3 of the rent and the feds pay the other 2/3 of the rent. But they could be displaced out of their homes. And if you look at the people that are living in the nonprofit housing, and Bridge has shared this information with our community, but these are people that are working and providing important services to our community. For example, in-home support service workers, they make $11.50 an hour. You can't find a place to live, and some of these people who are helping our seniors be able to stay and live in their homes are commuting from Vallejo and Santa Rosa to be here to work in our community. Somebody asked, well, who else would live here? We have 3 of our grocery clerks in the new Marinwood market. If you haven't been there, go check it out. It's a nice little market. 3 of the grocery clerks that work there said they would love to be able to live in the community where they're working. And so
the mayors and our sons would like to live in Marin County too, and they cannot afford it.
Well, so then that's a problem. So you've identified the problem.
No, we live with it. We do not invite more problems. You just said how very cut our budget is and how certain people cannot even be maintained we have right now.
Well, but I hear the point that you're making. I hear the point that you're making, but I would also like to offer that what we're doing is eliminating some of our younger workforce and younger talent. I am on the San Rafael Chamber of Commerce, as is the mayor, and one of the issues that comes up from the business perspective is how difficult it is to attract new businesses, especially startups in our community, when their workforce doesn't have the opportunity to find housing that's in a reasonable distance from where the work is. And so if we want to have a healthy economy, that's part of the factor. And it's a very complex issue, and there aren't any easy answers to this. But I do believe that we as a community can put our heads together and figure this out in a really rational way.
So we're taking questions now.
I will, because I just finished. Oh, just the last announcement. On May 30th, I was working with Richard Holland. I don't know if any of you know Richard. Richard Hall on developing a forum at the Marin Civic Center on May 30th from 6:30 to 8:30. And the topic is gonna be Plan Bay area. Is it good for the region? Is it good for Marin? And Supervisor Kinsey, who's on MTC, and Supervisor Mark Luce from Napa, who's the ABAG president, will be talking about one perspective. And then there are two speakers who are going to be talking about the more local perspective, especially related to transit, Randall O'Toole and Tom Rudin. So I think it's going to be moderated by Judge Adams, so if she keeps a tight courtroom, I'm sure she'll keep a good tight debate and timeline, but that would be a good opportunity to hear different perspectives on that topic. So yes, now questions.
So you're talking about this housing. First, I'm sorry about your family.
Thank you.
So you're talking about housing, and you're talking as if it's happening. I mean, the way you address this woman over here, you're saying this is what's happening. So, I mean, I have two kids in Dixie. I grew up here, and there is a tremendous concern in the community that we're shooting before we're aiming. The question is, I'm very interested in hearing your concerns, because you paint a very nice picture of teachers. You paint a very nice picture of working clerks. I mean, it's, God willing, if that's what happens, that's what happens. But I'm very curious to hear your concern, number one, of what happens if it's not as rosy as you point. Number two, have we actually passed the point of no return? I mean, you know, the mayor and Dane were talking about community, they're talking about involvement, they're talking about engagement, they're talking about questions and discussions, Board of Education, they're talking about all these different things that, to me, are critical in the planning and the early discussion stages, and we're already building units in all these, we're rezoning. And the biggest concern is the community is built and zoned already. You're representing us.
Yes.
I don't know if any of us want rezoning. I don't know if any of us want growth. I don't know if any of us want concerns with our schools, our fire, our police, our elderly, our emergency response, the water, the environment. And I didn't even mention the word low income. So I think we believe that you can take us to a place, but we need to make sure that we all are on the same page in getting there. And right now, I don't think we are.
Well, I want to emphasize that housing element and Plan Bay area does not take away local control. So we don't have a specific plan yet for any development in any part of the unincorporated area. If a developer actually comes in with a development proposal and they submit it to the desk at the county, the planning department, they look to make sure the application is complete, and then it starts a full public process with full EIR. There was a project in the Oakview, it's on Las Colinas and Lucas Valley Road, that the property owner wanted to develop 300 units of housing on that hill there. 23 years later, and 2 environmental impact reports later, they got 28 units. So what the potential is, and what finally happens after public process and environmental review, could be 2 completely different things.
That's very scary. So you didn't answer, so the question, your concerns, what happens if it doesn't? Number 2, when we pass the point of no return, where we can still continue to discuss this, so we're not stuck all of a sudden with units popping up in Marinwood and down in Lucas Valley. And, I mean,
so the other point that I've made, and I've made this point on the next door side, is that I don't support rezoning any of this. I think we can meet our housing element process without having to do any rezoning. And the further away you get from the corridor, the 101, the less it makes sense to have high-density housing. Now, Grady Ranch wasn't even on the docket as a possibility until Mr. Lucas decided he wasn't going to build his commercial property.
Why did he decide that?
There were a number of factors that were related to some of the decisions he made in reopening his environmental report and some concerns that the community had. And I don't want to put blame on any one individual, but as things unfolded, and this is what happens with environmental review, right? If you open up the process, the public has the right to comment, and things happen as a result of that process. So what now he has is a piece of property that is zoned the same way as the Lucas Estates are zoned. And so he could have a developer come in and submit an application. They have to go through the whole same process that anybody else would have to going from scratch again. So, and the problem with the Grady Ranch is there's no sewer, there's no water, there's no cable, there's no electricity, there's a sensitive creek with a genetically unique threatened steelhead species, there's hydrology and geology issues, there's a number of problems with developing that property. So it's not going to be an overnight process. Regarding Oakview, that's already been master planned and entitled through a very long process. That process was completed in 2005, and yet you still drive by Lucas Valley Road, you see the for sale sign there. There hasn't been any development, even though they're entitled to that. St. Vincent Silvera was another property. At one point, the city of San Rafael was looking at doing anywhere from 500 to 2,000 units of housing with up to 500,000 square feet of commercial. That would have been a whole new little mini city, perhaps. And that didn't happen. Now what it's zoned for is there's a cap of 221 units total in that whole 1,300 acre area, with the idea that any development would be clustered in the already built environment. So, you know, our community has paid a great deal of attention and has been very involved in process over the years to get projects that are Marin-esque. And so, you know, I don't think you have to worry about that. Regarding the school issue, I want to address this issue around the schools. You know, part of why I moved I live in Roundtree, which is a block away from the plaza. And I moved there, I was a single mom raising my kids, and the school district was one of the attractions. Also that little plaza that had a grocery store and a Chuck E. Cheese and a deli, they had all kinds of other community serving services was there too. And the open spaces were beautiful. My kids got a ton of poison oak over the years. And when the shopping mall went under and businesses started moving out, and we discovered there was a brownfield site there, a toxic plume there under the dry cleaner, and there was vandalism and all kinds of other problems, especially in the nighttime hours there. We embarked on discussions with the property owner about what the community would like to have happen there. And those conversations started years ago, to the point where if you go to the county website, to the archived September 26th meeting in 2006, you can watch the community member argue for a certain vision that they had at that time. Now, is that what's going to get done? Who knows? We don't have an application yet. Bridge was going to submit an application in January, which would have started the process. But they haven't yet. So who knows if they're going to submit. But with the schools, I absolutely hear those concerns. And because it's a basic aid school, first of all, the property, a nonprofit would not pay, the nonprofit would only be able to not pay the ad valorem piece for the part where the nonprofit housing was. So in Bridge's proposal that they've talked to the community about, they would have one of the parcels that would be fully commercial with some market rate units on one end, and they would be paying the full freight. The other end with the nonprofit, they wouldn't be having to pay the ad valorem piece, but they would have to be paying every single voter initiative tax that we voted for. So the new Measure B that just got passed, any Dixie bonds, any of those, they would still have to pay, whether they're nonprofit or not. And so, will that meet the needs of the school district? No, but I'll tell you that, you know, in Marinwood, we have a lot of older people living there that are moving out and new families moving in. So the capacity issue is something that the school district is going to have to address, whether Marinwood gets built or not. We've seen, when my kids were in Dixie School, there wasn't a Mary Silvera. It was, my kids had to go to Dixie, which was 2 miles down the road from where we lived. And it wasn't until after they got out of high school and we started seeing it, older people moving out, new families moving in, that they reopened Mary Silvera. In the 50s and 60s, it's my understanding, I've talked to the Dixie School Board folks about this, that there were 2 middle schools and 8 elementary schools, and they had 30 to 40 kids per class. And so, you know, they still have those buildings. So the question is, what will they do? Will they add a new module to address the needs that they already are going to have in growth? If Bridge or a nonprofit comes in for an application, I've been in conversations with Tom Lowasser, board members, and their finance guy, with our county administrator and Tom Peters from the foundation, to talk about what can we do to help participate in ensuring that there isn't any undue burden from any all-affordable housing program that might go in there. Now, I wasn't a fan in the beginning of all affordable housing. We had 2 for-profit developers that tried to come in and do something there, and both of them said the price tag was too high, the brownfield site was difficult to deal with, and they couldn't make it pencil out with the requirements that the community wanted. There was, well, one of them said, you know, it doesn't give me profit unless I can get 130 units on there. And the community doesn't want 130 units. They want 80 or 70 units. And so, you know, trying to do something that works with the community and attracts a developer to come in and redevelop a derelict strip mall has been a challenge. I'm not gonna, you know, fuss around about that. But I haven't heard any viable alternatives yet, and the property owner hasn't been interested in hearing from anybody else, because right now the property owner determines who they want to go into contract with for development. All we can do is respond to it and go through the public process, and I will guarantee you that we will go through an environmental review process that will allow the public to make all the comments about school and traffic and all the other issues as we determine what's the right thing to happen there. Okay, if you don't mind, I'm going to let a couple other people talk. I'm happy.
I have something very short. Didn't Corona
Wait, you've had a lot of
Yeah,
you've had a lot of
Let me do 2 other people and we'll come back to you. I'll come back to that question. Let me take these two questions first and we'll come back.
Okay, Suzanne, I'm going to have a statement with a question. I am a Marine resident for 6 years now, and I kind of observe Marine as it operates. And I really think we need to build homes. For example, I said 3, yes, we need to build new homes, low income and affordable homes. For example, 300 kids graduate every year from Carolina High. If they chose to live in Marin, they should be able to live here. They probably go to college.
They cannot afford to go to the
And please, I'm going to ask that we be respectful when other people are speaking. I know you have issues and concerns and you want to express yourself. But let me.
We own a home next door. We own a home in Berkeley. We own a house in Palo Alto and a home in Miami. So we are owners. And we have to build new homes for people to live. And I agree that Marin needs to open up and get out of the box and build homes. And people cannot just assume they're just going to be criminals or people going to burn down the neighborhood. There's a lot of very intelligent people with a master's degree cannot live in Marin. They should be able to live in Marin. You know, they shouldn't be forced to go live in San Jose or Berkeley or Richmond, and that's just what I feel about it.
Thank you for your comments. Yes?
I totally support what she's saying. And all I hear from the opponents of this is we don't want anything to change. Well, I have news for you. Things change. You have a baby, they graduate high school, they go to college, they have children, they change. If you have a child, you're contributing to the problem. 60% of the traffic going down 101 is people coming here to serve your comfort and safety needs. They are your firemen, they are your policemen, they are your teachers, they are the people who take care of your aged parents who would die in their homes without people who respond when you have a heart attack are the firefighters who are stuck on 101 for an hour getting here from Vallejo or Santa Rosa. Those are the terrible people that you don't want living next to you. Well, I want them living next to me. I want them to have a on their head. I think if people work and serve and live and suffer with us, they deserve to have a roof over their head in our community. They deserve to be our neighbors and our friends. And I think this whole thing about, oh my God, we can't even take 1%, less than 1% of the burden of this region is so shameful. I think the idea that a population in Sanibel alone of 52,000 people cannot accommodate another 700 individuals is crazy. And I think that none of us in our hearts really believe that or want that. We're just scared. But we have really responsible, smart people in our Board of Supervisors, in our San Rafael Planning Department, in our Marin County Planning Department, who are taking all these issues that we don't really understand into account and trying to figure out how to make that work in a way that preserves our comfort and our safety and our confidence. And I think attacking them and asking for, excuse me, recall election.
So I'm gonna thank you for your comments. I want to get back to the question you asked about Corte Madera. And Corte Madera sent an intent to withdraw from ABAG. It won't be valid for a whole year after they send their intent. What happens if you pull out of ABAG, then the state directly tells you how many houses you have to build, and you have to argue directly with the state. Well, yes, that is what happens. You're shaking your head. No, I was on ABAG for 9 years, so I know that. And the problem, what happened with Corte Madera when they did submit a housing element a number of years ago was housing advocates sued them. The housing advocates won in court, and the judge said you can't even, you are obligated to submit not only a plan, but you actually have to build the housing. And that's why San Clemente is down there now. It's an affordable housing program. But the nuance to that was they were also not allowed to issue one other permit to any other of their Corte Madera residents while they were going through that process. So there are challenges if you're not complying with the state law. And just because you submit the housing element doesn't mean that it gets built. All it means is that you're showing where the opportunity areas are. If it gets built or not will depend on the local process, which in this county is very extensive and very arduous. So there was a lady here that wanted to ask a question.
I do agree with her as far as, we go, my daughter is in Santa Rosa, we go up there on the holidays and the traffic 101 is flooded going north because all the parents are going north because their kids can't afford to live here. But anyway, so 2 questions quickly, I hope. One was these consultants that you're paying the consultants to take these surveys. And the mayor said that these surveys all say, oh, everybody's happy. I have lived here for 30 years, never once have I had a phone call. Never once have I been surveyed. And I am not happy. Because Delganado, if you came down Delganado, I look like I'm drunk, trying to avoid all the potholes.
Mayor, are you hearing that?
I have called the public works to find out when are they going to pave on Delganado. You see every other street is paved. And he said, well, the end of summer maybe, or in the fall. And I said, the potholes, who's paying for our repair of our cars? Because we don't want, there's nobody, we are. And the other question is, well, the surveys, the consultants that we're paying all this money for, to make phone calls?
No,
Why are the clerks making phone calls?
These are the consultants that we hire for doing actual work for our community, for doing planning for like our farmers market that we're doing.
But according to the paper, This insultants that we pay $40,000 for to make survey phone calls. They're not even asking the questions that would get the actual answers, but they're asking questions that would say, oh, well then it looks like, oh, everybody's thrilled to death. Well, I'm not. And the other quick question is the pension and the health care. Whoa, you know, that we're paying, what, 59 cents on the dollar the taxpayers are paying for, according to the paper this morning.
That's in San Rafael, that's not the county.
Oh, well.
The county is closer to 80% funded.
Still in all, if you're saying that they're what my question is, if you're taking excess, you said to help pay it down, this excess monies, could they be using for the service, for the fire, for the paramedics, for the roads? I don't know what excess monies are paying this down.
It's the money that we saved by eliminating positions. So people left their jobs and then those salaries were accounted for and not spent.
Services that we are already paying
Well,
for.
we're paying for those services, we're doing it a lot more efficiently, and half of the funds that were those savings are actually going into speeding up our county roads program. So our county roads are getting paved at a much faster rate now, and that's another area where we hire outside contractors because we don't have the people in our staff to do all of that road work on their own. So we go out to the lowest bid, we get the best deal, and the gelatis, I don't know if you've seen, they've got trucks all over the place. They usually end up getting a lot of the bids because they come in at a lower rate. And so we're going to be doing a big project in coordination with San Rafael down Peacock Gap because that community was dealing with the rock quarry issue for a number of years. Their road is in pretty abysmal shape. They just redone their medians, and now we're going to do a good resurfacing there in coordination with the quarry as part of their permit agreement in the city and the county. So we are trying to work more collaboratively too with our cities and towns to try to get the most bang for the buck. But the city has its own roads program, and I'm not sure where in the queue Del Ganado is. That would be a question to confirm with your city folks. But if anybody who's in the unincorporated part of Marin wants to know what road projects are coming, call the Public Works Department. I have my cards in the back. I have information about county programs that are going on. I have an FAQ sheet about housing element, Plan Bay area, lots of links. So there's a lot of information available, but these are really complex issues. There's not a lot of easy answers. Even with the funding on basic aid schools, it depends on, there were a lot of people during the recession that went to the county assessor and said, lower our property taxes because we're underwater. So part of the lower budget for Dixie was because a lot of our neighbors are paying less property taxes than they had been in previous years. We have students that come in that transfer in from other areas, from Nevada or San Rafael or other areas, because their families are working here. But those families aren't paying property taxes, contributing to the education of those kids. 20% of our property taxpayers in the Dixie School District have kids in the school, but the other 80% of us, like me, who's paying my property taxes, I don't have kids in the school, but I vote for every single issue that comes up for schools because I know that good schools means my property values are good and our kids are getting a great education. And I really believe that that's where the heart of our community is in ensuring that our kids, all of our kids, are getting quality education and that we're providing the resources that they need to get that. Now, unfortunately, the state has been in some trouble, and we're not very well funded by our state. And that's an issue that we need to sink our teeth into and work over our state legislators and our governor in making sure that they're providing the funding that we need to really make sure that our educational programs are at the level they need. I'll take one more question and then I have to go, unfortunately. Wait, 2 more questions. Yes?
What's going to become of, the old Rite Aid store at Northgate Mall is maybe 10 just sits there. What are the plans for the old Rite Aid store at Northgate Mall?
Yeah, I don't know. You'll have to, the mayor, that's in the mayor's jurisdiction, and Council Member Connolly. So I don't know what the city is planning for that. And there was one more question.
Yes. I have to say, nobody is talking about 1% of affordable housing. Your logic doesn't make any sense on two levels. First of all, school teachers and firefighters make over $65,000 a year. Okay, that's the first thing that's wrong. Second thing is, I'm not sure when the last time you were in our public school system, but it doesn't seem like you're in reality at all, because we're not talking about 1%. We're talking about 70% of affordable housing going in one school district and in Lucas Valley and Marinwood. 70%. That's not equitable.
For unincorporated
For
Marin.
unincorporated Marin. That makes no sense for the school district. So what have you done, Susan, to spread out the equity to make this fair for unincorporated Marin?
So 70% of affordable housing is not going into Marinwood and Lucas Valley. That's something that's been put out there that people have
546 out of 775 units.
Let me finish answering the question, please. The issue you're referring to is this whole housing element process that we're going through right now, where opportunity sites, potential development sites are identified. Whether or not we put them in the housing element or not, Grady has the potential for up to 240 units. Hetfield has a few hundred acres that he wants to develop. We have Oakview, which already has a master plan for 28 units and the potential for a senior living facility. We have St. Vincent Silvera that has the potential for a cap of 221 units. We have the Marinwood Plaza, which in the general plan, after the community in 2006 asked the board to incorporate it, cannot go beyond 100 units of housing. And it'll probably be less because the community doesn't want to take that much. So when you add up all of the potential, there is a potential because in unincorporated Marin, there's not a whole lot of places. But we're also looking at Strawberry, Tam Valley, Kentwood, Kentfield, over by the college. There are some they're going to be doing some redevelopment there. We're looking at a few smaller properties in West Marin. But in 1972, our visionary leaders at that time decided that we were going to focus development on the 101 corridor and protect the inner rural area with agriculture and protect the coastal parklands. And we've done a really good job of doing that. In the last general plan, we added the Baylands corridor and are looking at sea level rise impacts so that corridor, now we have a fourth corridor. So that gives us very limited areas that we can look at as possible development areas. One of the questions that I've asked in ABAG is, so what happens when we've achieved build out? You know, at what point do we push back and say, okay, all of these areas that are zoned for this, we've gone through the planning process, housing is built, you know, we can't do anymore. Then what happens? And nobody has that answer yet. So, you know, I think that, you know, having done this for 10 years now, I know that the planning process works. I know that the public has many opportunities to comment on any specific plan that would come forward. And just because something is identified as potential in the future does not equate with it's actually going to get built the next day. There has to be a very arduous, thorough environmental review process. So I'm going to say good night now because I think
people need to drink water. The schools need to be funded. This is not a plan without it.
Thank you so much.